Hello, my witchy friends. I have for you today my most consulted academic book on witchcraft and magic. And I wanted to read you some passages, show you some of the illustrated components of this history, and just talk to you a little bit about what we see together. This book is edited by the brilliant Owen Davies, and I think that he is one of the scholars I admire the most in my field. He has done so much for the history of folklore and grimoires and British witchcraft history, and I can only aspire to be someone as impactful as him in my field someday. But reading his work is such a pleasure. But before we open this book, how about we light some candles? So I've got this black one, which I'll light first. I think it really matches the aesthetic of this video. And we'll place it over here for a little bit of extra light. And then I also have this lovely, I like to call it goblin green candle with these little diamond accents on it. And this one throws a lot of light. Okay, so there is our second candle. So that's a lot better. I feel like everything is nicely lit now. So let's crack open the Oxford Illustrated History of Witchcraft and Magic. Okay. So, as it says here, Owen Davies is professor of social history at the University of Hertfordshire. He has written extensively on the history of magic, witchcraft, ghosts, and popular medicine, including The Haunted, a social history of ghosts, grimoires, a history of magic books. I highly recommend that one if you're into this. I mean, you must be if you're here right now. Paganism, a very short introduction, and so on. There's all sorts here. There's a page with praise. And this lovely editor's foreword, which I'd really like to start with because I think that reading the foreword often gives you a lot of overlooked insights. It really helps ease you into the text itself. How about I bring in my handy dandy little pointer so that you can follow along. Many people are vaguely familiar with the history of witchcraft and magic. topic attracts regular media interest. Yet, it is also a subject around which swirls much misunderstanding, misinformed opinion, and dubious facts. One such perennial notion is that witches were burned in England, and likewise the erroneous belief that millions of people were executed during the era of the witch trials. Over the last 2 centuries, this notorious episode in European history has repeatedly been portrayed as a stain on the medieval age. Yet the vast majority of the prosecutions and executions took place not in the Middle Ages at all, but in what historians refer to as the early modern period, an era which runs roughly from the mid-15th century to the mid-18th century. Words like hysteria and craze litter the older literature on the subject and continue to be widely used to describe the trials. Yet, as James Sharp and Rita Voltmer show in their chapters, the causes and pattern of the European witch trials were not the result of mass delusion or credulity. The greatest minds of the era believed in the reality of witchcraft and magic. This was a time in Europe when the Reformation transformed religion and politics, legal systems were becoming more sophisticated, and science made great strides in understanding the natural world. The belief in witchcraft and magic was not some evolutionary stage that society passed through on the way to general enlightenment and scientific progress. The intense academic and public focus on the early modern witch trials can itself be seen as problematic. Does the execution of tens of thousands of people, for example, make it more important and of more historic value to research and understand witchcraft and magic in this era, rather than before or after? One of the aims of this Oxford Illustrated History is to describe how witchcraft and magic have a history that stretches back to the beginning of writing 5,000 years ago and remain with us today as relevant cultural phenomena that continue to reflect fundamental aspects of contemporary societies and individual psychologies. And then it talks about the last 3 chapters and a little bit more general information here. Less exciting to some perhaps, but equally fascinating, is what the history of witchcraft and magic can tell us about how societies formed, developed, and changed over the centuries. It enables us to see the profound, if often subtle, interactions over the centuries. It enables us to see the profound, if often subtle, interactions between different cultures that are obscured by studying the bigger picture. Okay. So a little bit more general information. What else do we have here? There's a chapter on demonologists. Very interesting. There's a pictorial record of witchcraft and magic, diagrams and depictions, and he says that it offers a great opportunity to provide a distinct approach that will focus on how the archives, imagery, and material culture shape our understanding of the history of witchcraft and magic. And then he ends with, "Let the magic begin." Okay, so let's take a look at our table of contents. The first chapter is by Peter Maxwell Stewart, and it's on magic in the ancient world. The second chapter is called Medieval Magic by Sophie Page. The third chapter is called The Demonologists by James Sharp. The fourth chapter is on The Witch Trials by Rita Faulkner. The fifth chapter is The Witch and Magician in European Art by Charles Zika. The sixth chapter is The World of Popular Magic, that's by Owen Davies. The seventh chapter, also by Owen Davies, The Rise of Modern Magic. The eighth chapter, Witchcraft and Magic in the Age of Anthropology, Robert J. Wallace. And chapter 9 is Witches on Screen by Willem de Blecor. So in my research, I focus more on this area of history. So early modern to the 19th century. What he says in this introduction is so very true, that the focus on the early modern witch trials is problematic, and that's part of what a lot of witchcraft scholars are going up against. We're trying to investigate some of the other things that were happening with witchcraft in different centuries, different portions of human history. In my case, I'm looking at literature a little bit more, but I love that he acknowledges that. I think that we might take a look. This is a hard decision. There's just so many different chapters that we could look at. We could start with magic in the ancient world, but I don't know. There's a bronze bell used in magic rituals, decorated with scenes of exorcisms of demons. It says it's Neo-Assyrian, 8th to 7th century BC. As fascinating as this part of witchcraft history is, I'm just not as familiar with it. I hope to be someday. Oh, this is really cool. These are semicircular wands, and it looks like they're made of hippopotamus ivory, and they were used by Egyptian magicians as symbols of their authority over the beings of power they were summoning to their assistance. The figures carved on them tend to represent protective deities and creatures which will dispel any evil spirits which might try to attack the magician or interfere with what he's doing. And there's an Egyptian statue here, and it shows a pouch containing an amulet. That's kind of cool. And there's a lot here about mummies as well as the living were protected by amulets of various sorts, which were slipped between the bandages during wrapping of the corpse. And several statues are depicted with chest pouches, which probably contained magical objects of one kind or another. Indeed. Oh, wow. Some such pouches we know contained a slip of papyrus on which was written a protective spell. And these were worn by children in very much the same way as boule and lumule, amuletic lockets and moon-shaped ornaments. that they were worn by Roman children. That's so fascinating. Wow. And here, there's a wooden spell board from Egypt, 4th century BC. This spell is to protect the owner against anyone or anything which might harm him. Fascinating. A little bit more of the amulet stuff. There's a doll here representing a human being. Might be stuck through with pins so that the pain inflicted thereby could be felt magically. Wow. And some wax figurines here. An incantation bowl. Wow. It's incredible. The inscriptions on these, mostly in Aramaic, run in a spiral from the rim to the center, the intention being to lure evil spirits deep inside. The bowl was then buried upside down to trap the unwanted spirit. Many of these artifacts have been found all over the Middle East and further afield. And then there's this chapter on medieval magic by Sophie Page. And it says, in the early Middle Ages, people used and feared magic for the same reasons they used or feared any other sacred ritual. Magic was thought to strengthen or sever relationships between people, to overcome material obstacles, and to spread good or evil by protecting a community or introducing sickness and health. But magic was the name given to a class of inappropriate sacred rituals, which were excluded from normative Christian practice. Magical activities used objects and language that were not obviously part of Christian material culture or the liturgy, or in ways or for purposes which made churchmen uneasy. An unauthorized sacred ritual was thought to express its practitioners' ignorance of appropriate sacred forms, adherence to heathen practice, or association with the devil. This is very interesting. And I do know that a lot of people aren't aware of the extent of medieval magic, which is why books like this are so important. Let's see. There's this image of philosophy and the 7 liberal arts from a 19th century copy of the lost manuscripts. I think there must be more context on that in here. It says, in the early Middle Ages, people could be described as performing magical actions, but there was little or no sense of a magical art as an organized body of knowledge. After the translation and dissemination of learned magic texts, magic began to be taken more seriously, and even its critics engaged with its claims of offering knowledge. knowledge of the cosmos, if only to condemn them. And she talks about all sorts of different examples of learned magic texts. There's also a subcategory here on natural magic. The category of natural magic emerged as a branch of natural science that studied properties and processes that were extraordinary but natural marvels. It was articulated most clearly by the theologian and Bishop of Paris, William of Auvergne, who suggested that natural magic included the spontaneous generation of such animals as frogs, lice, and worms, the action some souls exercised on bodies outside themselves, and the sensus naturae or estimativa, by which, for example, the sheep divined that the wolf was its enemy. Interesting. So here's another one, image magic. The combination of rare natural materials, engraved representations, and a supernatural source of power was central to image magic. Image magic was the most common genre of magic, translated from Arabic into Latin, and consisted of rituals to be performed over a three-dimensional object, an image or talisman, in order to induce a spirit or heavenly body, to imbue it with power. The magical object could be created by sculpting metal or wax, inscribing a piece of parchment or cloth, or engraving an object like a ring, mirror, or knife. Rituals included the invocation of spirits. Oh, it looks as though there are some really nice images of some manuscripts here. So this is more of like a homeopathic writing. It says it's magical uses of the plant Lunaria. And this is a drawing of a late Roman imperial cameo. Okay. The magic square of Mercury. And this is just a continuation of the conversation on image magic. And there's some more manuscripts. I wonder if these are illuminated. Illuminated manuscripts are so beautiful. If you ever have the chance to see them in person, they have so much detail and they just evoke this feeling of wonder in me. Angel magic. Here's an example of an incredible illuminated manuscript. So those beautiful letters are just so gorgeous. And the gold in them shimmers and shines if you're in the right light. Okay, so as an antithesis to angelic magic, there's demonic magic, of course. As with angel magic, many of the ideas and practices of demonic magic were shared with mainstream Christianity. First, the rituals were an extension of the valid and conventional ritual of exorcism, through which a priest gained control of a spirit by commanding it by the names of Christ and the saints. The difference between exorcism and necromancy lay in the fact that necromancers aimed to summon and keep demons present rather than expel them. Secondly, the powers of demons which necromantic rituals described conformed to significant because it increased the attractiveness of necromancy to practitioners, while also making the alliance between humans and demons a frightening prospect to critics of magic. As you can see, there's just so much here, and we can't unpack all of it. Looks like this is a magic castle from the Manual of Military Technology. It does look like a magic castle to me. Another talisman. Okay, what else do we have? The defense of magic. In the late Middle Ages, magic was condemned with increasing vigor and precision at universities and in legal codes. The development of the concept of the demons, or of the demonic pact, and the involvement of the Inquisition in investigating magical practices widened the scope of persecution and contributed to the construction of an emergent theology of witchcraft. Here we go, we're getting closer. But the translations of learned magic texts from the Greco-Roman, Arabic, and Jewish traditions, and the discovery of their intellectual resonances with Greek and Arabic philosophy and science, led also to a gradual shift towards more positive attitudes to magical texts and ideas in Western Europe. By the end of the Middle Ages, the number of defensible magic texts had grown, and works of angel magic were being increasingly widely disseminated. Moreover, some magic texts had been written which had real authors, whose ideas relied on philosophical justifications, and which even integrated necromancy within compendia of different kinds of ritual magic. Since theological condemnation made authorship dangerous, the fact that authors were becoming confident to put their real names to works of magic is a striking development. How did learned magic survive and flourish in the difficult conditions of the late Middle Ages? 3 factors are particularly important. The first is that the strategies with which the authors of learned magic texts appealed to the intellectual curiosity and the spiritual thirst of medieval men and women were to a large extent successful. The theology of witchcraft shifted the inquisitorial gaze onto female popular practitioners and away from the male practitioners of learned magic. And finally, censorship was difficult to enforce in the manuscript culture of the late Middle Ages. I mean, that makes sense. It would be pretty hard to censor some of the things that were being circulated in the manuscripts. But I find this shift in the medieval period to female-focused magic practitioners so fascinating. Magic texts advocated the practitioner's secrecy in order to create a sense of their power and to conceal suspicious texts from scrutiny. They were kept and circulated in ways that were intended to avoid censorship. In medieval libraries, they might be concealed in secret rooms in which only the owner had access. A tactic the cleric, surgeon, and writer Richard de Forneval employed with his collection of occult texts at Amiens. Sometimes works of magic were simply concealed in plain sight in the illicit subject areas of the library. This was the case with the collection of over 30 magic texts at St. Augustine's, Canterbury, in the late Middle Ages, which were fairly typical in being compiled with more acceptable genres such as astronomy, medicine, devotional literature, and natural philosophy. At this abbey, the common tactic of encouraging donations to the library, offering annual prayers for the souls of donors, also gave the books a bias association that probably discouraged criticism of their contents. That's so fascinating. I love the idea of a secret library that you can only access by special permission with witchcraft texts. It's so amazing, my goodness. In manuscripts, tactics to evade suspicion took the form of cautionary marginalia or even notices condemning magic, which allowed the piety of the owner to be expressed while the usability of a ritual was unaffected. Wow. And it says, to conclude this chapter, since summoning spirits, especially demons, was itself a dangerous pastime, the practice of magic must have attracted the interest of specifically those men and women whose curiosity, quest for knowledge, power, and salvation, and perhaps even pleasure in risk-taking, made it too tempting to resist. And chapter 3 is on the demonologists, so a little bit more on demonology. I'm not as familiar with demonology, but it says here, for the historian of witchcraft, the term has acquired a wider resonance. By demonology, most such historians would understand the intellectual system that expressed the framework within which educated Europeans between the 15th and 18th centuries understood and debated witchcraft, frequently with reference to related matters like magic more generally, popular superstitions and religious fallacies, prophecy and fortune-telling, and demonic possession. I am quite familiar with the sensation of demonic possession and how women were often victims of demonic possession, especially in the 16th century. And this was something that happened in a lot of places. It even has happened in Canada, not just in the United States or in other countries. It's everywhere from what I've discovered in my research. And there were a lot of different ways to treat demonic possession in the 15th and 16th centuries. You could use relics, which were objects with often religious significance, to exorcise the demon out of the body of the afflicted person. And often possession happened because of witches. So that's a little bit of our early understanding of possession, how it was cured. There were lots of different remedies that were used to get rid of it. And I love this image. The caption is just, witches working weather magic. I mean, what more can you ask for? This is really the perfect afternoon in my books. And we won't get into this. If you're curious, just Google the Devil's Kiss, and I'm sure the Wikipedia page will come up, and you can read all about that on your own time. Okay, so we're moving through the demonologists. Oh, and it looks like there's some stuff on Joseph Glanville here. I'd like to read, but oh, this is so great. This is another really popular image that I've seen multiple times, which is writing to the Sabbath. So it's from an 18th century chapbook, and I see it around all the time. Let's see what it says. We'll start here. Although perhaps a somewhat more rapid process than the creation of the demonic witch stereotype, the dismantling of demonology was a slower and more partial process than what may have been expected. The crucial point was the difficulty of making a complete break with an acceptance of the reality of the spirit world and of the contact between humans and demons, of the direct intervention of the devil in human affairs. Okay, so this is the conclusion of the chapter. And it says a more rational approach was being taken to Christianity, and judges were proving themselves unwilling to convict in witchcraft trials. So the system, we should remind ourselves, was durable, flexible, and however foreign to the modern observer, complex and intellectually demanding. Wow. Okay. So I can see a lineage, a sort of through line in this book. So we've moved from ancient magic to medieval magic, then to demonology, and now to the witch trials. And this is sort of where I've been trying to land at in this video. So the witch trials, and this article is by Rita Baltimore. What was a witch trial? Simply stated, it was a legal, punitive procedure against people of both sexes accused of practicing criminal witchcraft, sorcery, and magic. But definitions are rarely simple in historical contexts. In the age of European witch hunting from the early 15th through to the late 18th century, one must distinguish, for example, between what were considered inherent magical abilities on the one hand, and the occult power of witchcraft on the other, transferred to the witch by the devil through a pact. Different languages throw up different definitions. There's a whole bunch on the German. Looking at terms for magic, sorcery, and witchcraft across European and non-European vernacular languages, similar problems of inconsistency occur. As a consequence, the witches who stood trial throughout Europe and its colonies appeared in a variety of guises. Young children, teenagers, adults, the elderly, men and women, simple folk and members of the elite, magistrates, Catholic priests, and Protestant ministers were all accused, charged, and executed as witches. Usually, a witch was imagined as the enemy within a community. It could be a wife or husband, child, family member, household servant, or neighbor. On the other hand, witches could also be the enemy from outside, a vagrant, beggar, or gypsy. Self-interest, insubordination, revenge, hatred, envy, greed, belligerence, and fornication were thought to drive these witches literally into the arms of Satan from a demonologist's point of view. Generally speaking, a witch represented the disorderly other, a rebel against patriarchal, social, political, and religious order. This all-inclusive stereotyping of enemies from within and without was broad enough to label even the smallest conflicts within families and households, in rural as well as in urban neighborhoods, as evidence of witchcraft. Likewise, the notion of witchcraft mixed with fears of rebellion and conspiracy, and provided labels for religious and political adversaries in confessional wars and turmoil. Depending on the political, religious, social, and particularly the judicial context, the relevant indictments listed an assortment of suspected evil doings. This included such as atrocities as committing malevolent witchcraft against people and livestock, suckling a demon in the shape of a pet, a familiar, creating tempests and hailstorms by evil spells, shape-shifting, night riding through the air, and gathering its habits to feast on human flesh and copulate with the devils. At its core, the cumulative concept of diabolic witchcraft contained 5 elements. Okay, very important. The devil's pact, sexual intercourse with the devil, the witch's flight, the attending of the Sabbath, and maleficium. Witch trials targeted women in greater numbers than men. The overall ratio for early modern Europe and New England is 75 to 80% women to 20 to 5% men. But this masks a lot of variation. The proportion of women amongst the victims of witch persecution ranged widely, both chronologically from witch hunt to witch hunt and geographically from region to region. And men outnumbered women in certain areas, and there's a bunch of different examples of that. And the trials occurred in a range of differing formats, from single cases to mass prosecutions, and they were conducted under a range of quite diverse legal systems across all of these different places. So there's a lot of broad general information. These charts are always really useful when I'm doing research. It just has affiliated kingdoms and territories, trial periods, executions, and there's lots of them. I love a little bit of witchy data to sort through. Very fun. And let's go through a little bit more of this chapter, and I think that we'll come back to this section next time, just because I don't want to leave anything out as we're getting towards the area that I'm researching. I think that this is definitely going to be a 2-part video. It says, witch trials had many different causes. Recent witchcraft scholarship acknowledges that no monocausal explanation should be accepted. A one-dimensional view pays too little attention to the distinctive geographies and territories, the particular religions, languages, cultures, politics, and economies within Europe and its colonies. The belief in magic and witchcraft was not the only existing system of explaining and handling mischief or misery. We need to distinguish between single trials for sorcery, magic, and witchcraft on the one hand, and linked trials with witch hunts based primarily on the collective matrix of a secret coven of witches, which in the Catholic context was understood as a heretical sect acting as the devil's minions and meeting at the Sabbath on the other hand. The analysis of isolated trials improves when considered within the entire local paradigm of criminal prosecution. Witchcraft slander suits are useful for gaining insight into popular witchcraft beliefs, for example, but should not be confused with criminal charges of diabolic witchcraft. And what factors established a witch hunt? At the end of the 16th century, severe witch prosecution happened in the imperial abbey of St. Maximin, near the city of Trier, which ranked among the very worst outbreaks anywhere in Europe. Around 400 executions between 1586 and 1596, thus a death toll of roughly 20% of inhabitants. Oh my goodness. One of the great tragedies of this era in history is just how many people died from all of these accusations and the mass hysteria that came out of all of this discourse surrounding witchcraft and magic. But I think I'm going to stop there. This book will always be around for us to return to, but I hope that you really enjoyed hearing little bits and pieces and excerpts and a couple little anecdotes from me as we read through this book. I really love sharing this part of myself with all of you, and I'm so happy that so many of you are interested in the rich and varied history of witchcraft and magic, as there's so much to share, and I can't wait to share it with all of you on this channel. So thank you so very much for joining me for this video and for being here at all. I really appreciate each and every one of you. And I hope you have a very restful, demon